Good afternoon and welcome. This webinar is a collaboration between the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, CFENP, and the National Cemetery Administration Scheduling Office. My name is Trulesta Pauling. I will be your moderator this afternoon. Everyone's phone has been muted. If you have a question during the presentation today, please type it in the Q&A box on the screen. I will read the questions at the end of the presentation and the presenter will provide a response. This presentation will not be made available after this webinar. This is a live recording. I would like to thank Mr. J. Dalrymple and Mr. Steve Ecker for this collaboration. We are grateful for your time today. But before we get started, I would like to introduce Mr. Conrad Washington, Director of the VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, who will provide today's opening remarks. Mr. Washington retired from the United States Marine Corps with 20 years of active duty service with a combat tour in 2004 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom II. Mr. Washington is a licensed minister actively serving in his faith. He received his master's degree of divinity in pastoral studies from Moody Theological Seminary. He also holds a master's in business management and a Bachelor of Science degree in education. Additionally, he is a graduate of VA's class of 2017 of Virtual Aspiring Leaders Program. Mr. Washington.
And thank you, True. I appreciate it. Hello to all of you who joined us. Welcome to the VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships webinar again. So yes, we are at it again, and we're excited to provide to you great information that I believe will be helpful to you for burial planning and processing for family members. So we're excited about the team that we have, our VA colleagues, Steve and Jay. Thank you both for taking time again and sharing your great knowledge. I want to share with you that please go to our website so you will have an opportunity to sign up for future webinars and newsletters and information as well. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to continuing to provide you great information to you and your families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. At this time, I would like to introduce Mr. J. Dalrymple, Director of the NCA Scheduling Office, who will provide some opening remarks. Please read a summary of his bio on the screen. Mr. Dalrymple has been the Director of the National Cemetery Scheduling Office and Deputy Director of Field Programs since October 13, 2019. He is responsible for all scheduling and eligibility activities, including pre-need determinations for veterans and family members. Mr. Dalrymple graduated in 2019 from the National Cemetery Administration Comprehensive Year-Long Cemetery Director Intern Program. Mr. Dalrymple is an Air Force veteran. At this time, I give you Mr. J. Dalrymple, the Director of the NCA Scheduling Office, for opening remarks.
Thank you, Trulesta, and thank you, Mr. Washington, for allowing us to speak today. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us and giving us the privilege to speak with you today as well. As Trulesta said, my name is Jay Dalrymple. I'm the VA's National Cemetery Administration's Director of the Scheduling Office located here in St. Louis, Missouri. With me today is also Steve Ecker, the Assistant Director of the Scheduling Office, who will be providing much of the materials for you. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with NCA and the VA operates 155 national cemeteries and 34 soldiers' lots and monuments sites in 42 states and including Puerto Rico. There are more than 4 million Americans, including veterans of every war and conflict, buried in VA's national cemeteries. And also important is NCA also provides grant funding and partners with 119 state and tribal veteran cemeteries across the country as well. Veterans have earned these burial benefits through your service and sacrifice to the nation, and we're here to support you with that. The scheduling office was initially established to support our veterans and their family members during one of their most difficult times in their lives. Almost all requests for burial in the national cemeteries now come through us, and we like to say we're the gateway to NCA. So if you have any questions prior to looking at burials, feel free to call us, and we'll support you. But today we're here to provide you information on a number of very important topics. First one being, what are the high-level eligibility requirements for burial in a VA national cemetery? And then looking at our pre-need burial program NCA offers to our living veterans, service members, and dependents. So you can start to do end-of-life planning in advance and make those decisions for your family. So we also want to hear questions you may have about the National Cemetery Administration and the pre-need program. Again, we're here to support. So thank you for your attendance and the opportunity to present this information to you. Back to you, Trulesta.
Thank you, Mr. Dalrymple. Now I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Steve Ecker. Mr. Ecker is the Assistant Director of the National Cemetery Scheduling Office since April the 12th, 2020. In this position, Mr. Ecker is responsible for assisting the Director with all scheduling and eligibility activities for veterans and their families. Mr. Ecker is a Navy veteran. He is a member of the United States Navy Ceremonial Guard, Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, Washington, D.C. Mr. Ecker, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trulesta and Mr. Washington. It's always a pleasure to speak at these briefings, and we hope you find this information helpful. Get through the slides here. Okay, so as Jay mentioned, we're going to talk about some important topics. Sometimes it's tough to discuss, or maybe not in the forefront of everyone's mind, but it's very important. And we like to say it's to me, it's one of the most important benefits that we can give our veterans, and that's final resting place in a national shrine. So today we're going to talk about general eligibility requirements, as Jay mentioned, what's included in the burial benefit, frequently asked questions we've taken from past webinars, who's eligible, pre-need information in the program overview, and how to fill out the form. So let's go ahead and get into burial benefits at a very high level. What is actually included in the VA burial benefit? It includes a gravesite in any national cemetery with available space, and this is available for casket or cremation burials. A grave liner or vault. The VA provides a concrete liner which the casket is placed and interred in. A government headstone, marker, or niche cover. Burial flag, a presidential memorial certificate, and military honors. Those aren't actually part of the benefit, but the National Cemetery Scheduling Office and the call center agents assist the families and funeral homes with coordinating these. So now let's talk about a few things that aren't part of the burial benefit. We like to refer to these as private or family costs, family responsibilities. Those include costs pertaining to cremation services, costs associated with funeral home preparation or services, costs for the purchase of a casket or an urn, transportation of any sort, that's to include transportation to the National Cemetery, cost of funeral home storage, and costs for obtaining a gravesite in a private cemetery if the veteran chooses to not be interred in a national. But as part of the VA benefit, families may be eligible to receive an allowance that's actually administered by the Veteran Benefits Administration, but that may help offset some of the cost that the family may incur. And any cost associated with disinterring an individual from a private cemetery is family costs. We see this quite a bit. Families may choose to bury their loved one in a private cemetery, and we'll get a lot of inquiries. Does the VA pay to transport and disinterment to a national? And that the answer is no. That's the family responsibility in that case. So now I'd like to cover some of the frequently asked questions. We kind of taken a collection of some of the past questions from past webinars, and we thought this is helpful to kind of to get ahead of some of the questions everyone on the call may have. Can I be buried in any national cemetery? The answer is yes. Veterans and eligible dependents can be buried anywhere in the country, any cemetery with available grave sites. Is the spouse required to be buried in the same national cemetery as the veteran? Short answer is no. Veterans and spouse, they can be interred in different cemeteries. We see this a lot. A veteran may pass away, and the family lives on the West Coast, and the surviving spouse, through the years, moves and relocates to the East Coast. So the spouse may be interred in an East Coast cemetery. That's perfectly fine. Will my spouse be buried next to me or with me in the same gravesite? Non-veteran spouses of veterans are interred in the same gravesite. So there won't be separate gravesites for each. In the instance where a veterans, when both spouses are veterans and determined eligible, an adjacent gravesite or set-aside grave may be requested through the cemetery for the surviving spouse at their time of need. Does it matter if I am cremated or casketed? It doesn't matter. That's the family preference, but it does depend on site availability for that national cemetery you may be looking at. For instance, there are some cemeteries that only accept cremated remains, and vice versa. So a lot of it just depends on the cemetery you're looking at and what's available at that time. Does the National Cemetery Administration manage Arlington National Cemetery? That answer is no. A lot of confusion on this. That's actually run by the Department of the Army, DOD. So that's the only national cemetery that the VA does not administer and run. Some more questions. Is my wife listed on the headstone also? Yes, the veteran's information is on the front of the headstone and the spouse information is generally presented on the back. Can I get a headstone if I'm cremated? The answer is yes. A headstone and marker is required for all remains types. Are there costs to have my spouse buried? Similar to the service member, there are no costs for burial benefits provided by the VA. Families are responsible, though, as I mentioned before, for funeral home and other expenses incurred that are required before arriving at the national cemetery. So the easiest way to remember this is we like to say, once you drive your loved one through the cemetery gates, the VA covers everything from that point. Can I request just a service and military honors if I am not being interred in a national cemetery? Yes, that's considered a memorial service. That's where the family's allotted time for a service and military honors if they so choose at a shelter. But there is no interment. If burial will take place in a private cemetery or occur at a later date. So we see this a lot. A veteran may be cremated. The family knows they want to have a service and honors, but they're not quite ready to let their loved one go. So they may want to hold on to the cremated remains. We've seen people hold on to them for years, or, they may hold on to them and have in their will that, they won't be interred until their spouse passes away. So it's perfectly fine to do that. What is the difference between in-ground cremation burial and being placed in the columbarium wall? It's kind of self-explanatory, but an in-ground cremation is traditional to a traditional casket burial where the urn is placed, the rest in the gravesite. A columbarium wall or niche is the placement of the cremated remains above ground. So let's change gears here a little bit and talk about the VA provided headstone. So as I mentioned, the VA provides a headstone and is required for all interment types. Generally, most have maybe seen the upright headstones, which are kind of standard in all of our national cemeteries. On each of those, they're all very uniform. And they include the person's legal name, the veteran's service branch, the beginning and end years of their life, date of birth and date of death, and the section. Families also have the option to have some additional inscriptions placed on the headstone, but that's all covered by the cemetery when they contact the family after speaking with the scheduling office and have all their services scheduled. So let's talk about who's actually eligible for burial in a national cemetery. Veteran service members, spouses, and dependents may be eligible for burial, as well as other benefits if they meet one of the following requirements. One of these must be true. A veteran who didn't receive a dishonorable discharge, or a service member who died while on active duty for training, or inactive duty for training. Also includes the spouse or minor child of a veteran. And in some cases, the unmarried adult child of a veteran may be eligible. Those are dependents with physical or mental disabilities. And in some cases, those dependents can be eligible after verification. So what do we consider a veteran? Under United States Code 38-101, the term veteran means a person who served in the active military, naval, or air service and whose discharge or release therefrom under conditions other than dishonorable. So really, generally, in layman's terms, that just means a veteran who served and had an honorable discharge or under honorable discharge. Some other common categories of persons eligible. And there's a kind of a two definitive circumstances that we deal with generally. Veteran with one or more days of active service. This is applicable for enlisted members who enlisted on or after September 7th, 1980. Before September 7th, 1980, a service member just needed 1 day of active service to be eligible. And for commissioned officers, that day is October 16th, 1981. So if a veteran enlisted in September 1st of 1980 and served 1 day, that veteran would be eligible and received an honorable discharge in an active branch. After September 7th, there was a 24-month requirement that came into play. So let's talk about that. After September 7th, 1980, veterans with at least 24 consecutive months of active duty service. So this is an enlisted person and a regular component. That's important to remember, who enlisted after September 7th, 1980, or an officer after October 16th, 1981, now had to serve a minimum of 24 consecutive months. There are exceptions to this. As you can see on the left side column, there's certain exceptions. Possibly an individual was discharged due to early out or hardship, or service-connected disabilities that were adjudged and later determined to be compensable by the VA. So there are a few exceptions, but generally the rule of thumb is if they enlisted after September 7th of 1980, they had to have served 24 months, 2 years. Some other common categories. Death benefits shall be granted to persons recognized by law as having a pensionable or compensable status. Really, this just means any veteran that's service connected or receiving certain pension funds are eligible for burial. Persons receiving service connected compensation. It's important here. Recently, the requirement changed. So now any veteran that's 0% or greater service connected are eligible for burial. So as you're, if you talk with veterans or you're in the funeral home industry and you're talking with families, this is an important thing to pass along that, especially when we talk about the pre-need program, which we'll talk about later. But if a veteran comes into your office and they're not quite yet service connected, and maybe they don't have qualifying service, it's important to pass along if at any point in time the VA does consider them and rate them to be service connected 0% or greater, they may be eligible for burial. So that's an important piece of information to remember if you work with veterans or if you're a veteran yourself or for your family. Spouse and unremarried surviving spouses. So the spouse or unremarried surviving spouse of a veteran is eligible. That spouse is eligible under that veterans eligible status. For remarried surviving spouses, there are certain, January 1st of 2000, if the death occurred before then, the remarriage to a non-veteran must have been terminated by divorce or death. So any surviving spouse of a veteran is eligible and can be placed with the veteran. We see a lot of cases where the veteran will pass away. We have a surviving spouse, and the surviving spouse may remarry. And even in that case, the spouse would be eligible to be placed with the veteran. So let's change gears a little bit. Unfortunately, we can't approve everyone for burial in National Cemetery as much as we would like to on some of these. Unfortunately, that's just part of the job here. But some of the common denial reasons that we see, dishonorable for VA purposes or DVA. That's when a veteran service information sent to the VBA regional office, and we call it being adjudicated, and the VA determines that that service member's military service does not qualify for VA benefits. But more importantly, let's focus on the active duty for training in less than 24 months and reserve guard time. I'm sure this, without a doubt, this is the biggest question for us as far as who is eligible as far as military service. So active duty for training, we see this a lot with reservists who might have served their 6 or 8 years and did all their active duty for training, their 6-month periods, and were discharged honorably. Unfortunately, if they weren't called to active duty for other than training, they wouldn't qualify. So tied to the September 7th, 1980 date, any veteran who served after that date who did not complete the 24 months, they in most cases will not qualify. Reserve or guard time. So any guard persons who didn't serve on active duty wouldn't qualify. And then I have some of the other ones listed: no military information, merchant marines. So there's a bunch of different denial reasons, but I wanted to highlight the 4 in bold just because those are the most common and the ones we get the most questions about. All right, so let's talk about pre-need eligibility for burial. I assume and suspect a lot of people on this call may be interested in the pre-need burial program, which we're very proud of. That's come a long way in just a few years that it's been around. But it really is a great benefit and a service that the VA provides in NCA. And as Jay mentioned, it allows you to apply in advance of need for burial in National Cemetery. This is a pre-need determination. Obviously, it helps burial planning and easing the family member stress at the time of need. Most importantly, we hope it eliminates delays at the time of need. So when a family's calling our scheduling office, hopefully we have a lot of their information already. If we have a pre-need request that's already approved, it's pretty much a seamless process. It's important to note that pre-need means just that. It's pre-need. So, before the time of death or time of need, if you will. We ask that you not complete a pre-need determination request if you are requesting burial at the time of need. So if someone has already passed away, it wouldn't be appropriate to request a pre-need determination. That would be considered a time of need burial, and we recommend you call our scheduling office and speak with one of our scheduling agents. So a few additional information and details on the pre-need program. It's for request in VA National Cemeteries only. So if you're interested in Arlington, you would contact Arlington directly to see what they may have available. For state VA cemeteries, pre-need program does not cover state VA cemeteries, only national. So you'd reach out to that respective state VA cemetery. Also important to note, this does not ensure space. It's not a reservation in any particular cemetery. However, we do ask on the form your desired cemetery. That's just used for internal tracking and utilization, but it is not a reservation. approval status may change, and additional verification at the time of need may be required. So what the pre-need program does is it notifies the veteran or dependent that at this time they are eligible for burial in National Cemetery. So who are our recommended applicants? Of course, we like, anyone can apply for a pre-need determination. Really, we're focused on assisting those who may need it the most. So if you're retired, service connected, or if you have families come in where the individual's retired, or I'm retired, I'm 100% service connected, those individuals are eligible. We know that for a fact. We're more focused on reservist, service, National Guards persons who may not be sure if they have qualifying service. We see it a lot. Well, I was called up for state, under state orders for this state emergency. Well, they may not actually qualify if it's not under a federal Title X order. So those are the individuals we want to talk to. Veterans, family members with any kind of questions. Unmarried adult children, as I mentioned before, with mental or physical disabilities, or, we'd like to have those requests because those take a little additional time and we require several different letters. So we want to do that legwork up front so we can put the family's mind at ease, to let them know if their unmarried adult child dependent may be eligible. Surviving remarried spouses. If you're unsure if, I think we were married or we were divorced, but you still want to know if you're eligible, you can submit a pre-need. So what information is needed to apply? Like every VA benefit or any benefit, really, there's a form, and the general information is pretty standard. So you'll need the sponsor, veteran social security number, date of birth, all their personal identifiable information. Most importantly, the more military service information you can provide on the form, the better. And as far as discharge documents, any discharge documents you have, please submit those. If you're applying on behalf of someone, maybe you have a power of attorney, or for those, VSRs or VSO organizations out there, there is a specific form, and there is a spot on the form to identify that. So let's actually talk about the form. We dedicate 3 slides to this. It's a little overkill, but we do get a lot of questions on this form, and we do get a lot of forms that are filled out incorrectly. So we thought it was important to kind of lay it out a little bit. The first step is to choose the VA National Cemetery, and as I mentioned before, that you'd prefer. So again, this isn't a reservation, but we do want you to think about that. And again, it does not apply to Arlington National Cemetery, and it does not guarantee you a spot in any national cemetery. But gather the supporting documents, gather the discharge documents, make sure you have full, accurate veteran information, as we talked about before. There are 2 spots, separate sections of the form, the veteran and the claimant. So be sure to fill out the application for each person, or claimant requesting the eligibility determination. And important to note, in box 2 at the bottom, each claimant needs to sign their own form. So if the veteran and the spouse are both submitting forms, they'll each fill out one separate form with themselves as the claimant with their respective signatures. So here's a zoom in of section 1, self-explanatory. This is all the veteran information. I want you to be able to fill this out in its entirety, make sure the data is accurate, and it reflects the legal names or the names that the individual served under. Now, section 2, as I talked about, is the claimant section. So this may not necessarily be the same as the veteran. As I said, if this is a spouse, this would be the spouse's information. The veteran information would be up top. And you can see it has a box to identify who you are in relationship to the veteran. So all the information on 25 through box 30 on the right, that's all the claimant information, which may be different from the veteran. And the bottom section is the signature section. As I mentioned, each claimant needs to sign their individual form. Okay, so how does one apply? The preferred method is by, through the website, through va.gov. You can also download the VA form, and the VA form is a 40-10,007. Those can be mailed in or faxed, but obviously, most of the time, it's the preferred method is through the website. That's the quickest way for us to get it and ensure we get all your documents and get it processed as quick as we can. As I mentioned before, for faster processing, submit all your supporting documentation with the application. Always err on the side of more information. We'll determine what we need to determine eligibility. In some cases, for surviving spouses or other dependents, as I mentioned, unmarried adult children, we may request death certificates, marriage certificates, medical information, etc. So what happens after you apply? Our goal is to complete your application within 120 days. I can tell you right now, we're processing requests a lot faster than 120 days, which we're happy to report. But that's our goal, to get it within to you 120 days. You will receive a packet in the mail through the Postal Service. It's a big manila envelope, and what we'll send, if approved, we'll mail the veteran an approval letter, and we send it actually a nice blue embossed envelope that you can store the letter in. Or if we need to, we'll send a request for additional information, or maybe if we need some additional information. And then if the veteran or dependent is determined not eligible at this time, or we need additional information, we'll send that information as well. If anyone needs updates or additional questions on pre-need, you can contact our scheduling office at 1-800-535-1117 and option 4. The pre-need department is here Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And we ask you, please wait to hear back from us rather than submitting your application. And what I would also say is, if you're a veteran who may go on and apply, or you work with veterans, please pass along that you will receive an on-screen confirmation when you submit it through va.gov. That is your confirmation that it's been received. Please do not submit multiple requests when online. So we're getting feedback, which we're working on trying to fix here, but we get feedback that I didn't receive a confirmation. Well, you won't actually receive a confirmation email, but you will receive notification on screen that it had been submitted. So please pass that along. But when we get multiple requests, that may and can just delay the process. So that's all I had for you today. I hope this information was helpful. It's good information, but like I said, a lot of times families don't want to think about this necessarily. So I'll turn it back to True, and hopefully we'll have some questions to answer. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Steve, for that wealth of information. I do not see any questions in the Q&A box right now. Everyone, we will be providing. Okay, Mr. Washington says he has a question.
Yeah, hey, look, I have a question. Thanks, great brief as usual. Appreciate it. But so I know you mentioned the only way that, Steve, the only way that people can find out if they were approved or what have you is through the United States Postal Service, through mail. That's the only way that individuals can confirm that they were approved or not. Is that correct?
Well, that's how we send our official notification. So anytime we send an approval or denial letter, we'll send it by postal service. But of course, if a veteran calls in and we're able to verify that they're eligible over the phone, like say they're service connected, we'll of course share that information and said, based on what I see, you would be eligible for burial. But our official pre-need notification is sent via postal service.
Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's good clarity.
Legally, we have to send.
I do have one question for you, Steve, from Mr. Oria Franklin. for Mrs. Oria Franklin. Can a veteran apply for Arlington with the right office and a secondary or alternative choice cemetery?
Yeah, and I'll let Jay answer that. And I think Jay had an additional statement to add on the last answer. So I'll let you go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, so Mr. Washington, on your question, I'll answer that first. Legally, we have to mail a letter to the claimant for the pre-need applications. However, we can also send copies of that for an individual if they request. We can send it through email because there's not PII data on it. So two different options available there. I know that there are requests to Congress to help change some of the laws so that we don't have to mail out paper all the time. But that's still going through the process. So hopefully that answers that.
Yes, thank you.
And then can a veteran apply for Arlington with the right office and a secondary or alternative choice cemetery? So again, Arlington is a different process as it's run by the Department of the Army. We've had a number of veterans that have applied for Arlington and then they find the wait times to be challenging. So they may then come to us or vice versa. They come to us while they're waiting for Arlington to make a determination and see what those timings are. Either way, you can do that. If we don't hear back in a reasonable amount of time, probably within 30 days, we will kind of place that request on or that case on hold and then wait for the family to contact back. So there are two different options there. Storing at home.
Ms. Franklin is asking an additional part to her question. She says, what do you mean by storing at home? Electronic submissions would be great.
Maybe, Ms. Franklin, you're referring to when I mentioned, when the family decides to keep their loved one's cremated remains, they may keep the urn on their, at home or wherever, just they may not be ready for interment yet. So that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, with the result of the COVID pandemic, we had a lot of families that kept their cremated remains with them until the families could travel again. So they may have held them for a year or more, and that's okay. We want you to still come to us because that is an important piece. So that's kind of what we mean by storing it at home. Families may keep them. Families may have made a decision that they want to inter grandma and grandpa together at the same time and have one big celebration. They obviously can do that. And then
Thank
when
you,
we're looking
Jay.
at electronic submissions, submitting for pre-need applications, that is our recommended approach, submitting it electronically through the va.gov website. And that actually speeds the process up for us instead of having to open mail, scan it, do all of the behind the scenes processing pieces. Everything submitted on va.gov actually goes directly into the system and gets assigned to scheduling agents on our side. So that's the preferred method. Then I see you have the number for Arlington. That number is 877-907-8585. And you can go on their website at Arlington National Cemetery Information Center as well. So if you go to arlingtoncemetery.mil, that is the Arlington website, and they can provide you with a lot of information on how they process everything manually.
In addition, she said, is that paid for by the VA?
Arlington is not paid for by the VA. However, we do partner with them on a number of different subjects. Actually, Arlington uses VA's contracts for headstones and markers. So when they order their headstones, they're ordering from the same process that the national and the state and tribal veteran cemeteries do as well.
Thank you, Ms. Franklin, for those questions. And the number again is 1-877-907-8585 that we've also added in the chat box, the website address. At this point, we do have on the screen the presenters' point of contact information if you care to reach out to them if you have additional questions. We also have our team email addresses and telephone number, website address, our email address, and also our Facebook page as well. If you care to contact us at this time, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Mr. Washington for closing remarks.
And thank you. I just want to say thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate it. Again, I know you had a lot of choices today to join virtual platforms, but we thank you for stopping by the VA, and we look forward to joining us next time. I want to thank Jay and Steve for their time as well. So thank you all and be blessed.
We do have another question, Mr. Washington, from Ms. Cheryl. If a headstone has an error, can it be replaced with the correct information?
That answer is yes, whether you're buried, your loved one has been buried in a national cemetery or in a private cemetery. If there is an error on the headstone, there are processes in place that we can get those replaced for you. So if it's a national cemetery, the cemetery leadership there, you can contact them directly. If it is a private cemetery, there is a form 1330 that you can resubmit with an error in fact, and that will get processed and approved as well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ecker and Mr. Dalrymple, for your remarks and presentation today. We certainly thank you for your time today. If you registered for this event, we will provide you with links and resources that Mr. Dalrymple and Mr. Ecker spoke about today in their presentation. A recording of this webinar and the transcript will be provided on our website at a later date. Please subscribe to our website and Facebook for future webinars and information. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day. Thank you and goodbye.